I wasn't looking for Tartaria when I found June 8, 1783, the day Iceland tore open. A 25-kilometer fissure erupting in violent bursts, lava fountains reaching nearly a mile into the sky, and something else, something that would hang in the atmosphere for 8 months, something that would fall as ash from Scotland to Syria. The official story is simple enough. The Laki eruption, they call it. A volcanic event. Unfortunate for Iceland, certainly. Tragic, even. 20% of the population dead within 3 years. But contained. Geological, natural. Just another entry in the long catalog of Earth's violent hiccups. And for most people, that's where the story ends. But I kept pulling the thread, because the Laki eruption didn't just affect Iceland. Contemporary accounts describe something far stranger. A dry fog that descended over Europe in mid-June 1783. Not volcanic ash as we understand it. Not the thick, choking plumes we see in modern eruptions. This was different. Witnesses called it a sulfurous haze. It smelled of burning, of metal, of something chemical. It was visible from Labrador to the Altai Mountains. It turned the sun blood red across the entire Northern Hemisphere. And it coincided, almost perfectly, with something else. The disappearance of Tartaria from maps. Let me walk you through what we're told happened. On June 8, 1783, a fissure system in southern Iceland called Laki began erupting. Over the next 8 months, it would release 14 cubic kilometers of basalt lava and 122 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. The sulfur dioxide reacted with atmospheric moisture to create sulfuric acid aerosols. These aerosols formed a persistent haze that spread eastward on the polar jet stream, covering most of Europe by late June. The haze caused respiratory problems, damaged crops, and contributed to an unusually hot summer followed by a brutally cold winter. By February 1784, the eruption had ceased, and gradually, the atmosphere cleared. Clean, contained, scientific. Except nothing about the contemporary accounts reads as clean. The haze appeared into distinct phases. The first phase arrived in eastern Scotland on June 14th, described as gloomy. With fine airborne ash, it persisted for 4 to 5 days, then vanished. Then came a brief period of clear weather, 3 days of normalcy. And then the second phase arrived on June 24th. This wasn't ash. This was the sulfurous aerosol cloud. And it stayed. Weeks turning into months, the sun rising red, setting red, visible but wrong. Like looking at daylight through colored glass. Gilbert White, the naturalist, documented it from Selborne in Hampshire. The peculiar haze, or smoky fog, that prevailed for many weeks in this island, and in every part of Europe, and even beyond its limits, was a most extraordinary appearance, unlike anything known within the memory of man. He noted the sulfuric smell, the way the haze seemed to resist normal weather patterns, how winds from the south should have dispersed it, but didn't. In Copenhagen, they saw a blood-red sun until late February 1784, 8 months of wrong-colored daylight. In France, reports describe the sky as brass-colored at midday. In Norway and Sweden, the haze strengthened with southerly winds and weakened with winds from the north, suggesting the source was moving, circulating, trapped in some atmospheric pattern that defied the normal dispersion of volcanic material. And here's what makes this stranger than a simple eruption: the timing of the ash fall itself. Tree ring evidence from Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario shows fire scarring from 1780, the year of North America's dark day. But the Laki eruption didn't begin until 1783. So we have to separate atmospheric events within a 3-year window, both involving darkened skies, strange haze, and ash falling from seemingly clear air. The 1780 event was attributed to forest fires. The 1783-84 event was attributed to volcanic eruption. But witnesses in both cases describe phenomena that stretch the boundaries of those explanations. The darkness writhing like a curtain in 1780, not gradual, not weather, a wall of blackness. The dual-phase haze in 1783, behaving in ways volcanic aerosols shouldn't behave. The red-tinged quality to both events, copper-colored edges, blood moon, brass sky, and both occurring in the exact window when something else was happening on maps. I started comparing cartographic records. In 1680, Nicholas Vischer's map shows Tartaria as a vast, clearly delineated region across northern Asia. By 1760, the region is still marked, but beginning to fragment into subdivisions. Russian Tartary, Chinese Tartary, independent Tartary. By 1800, the name is gone, replaced by the expanding borders of Russia and China, by newly surveyed territories, by the language of empire rather than the language of unknown space. The standard historical explanation is obvious and reasonable. European cartography improved, explorers penetrated deeper into Central Asia, Russia expanded eastward, China solidified its borders. The vague label Tartaria was replaced by more precise geographical and political terms. Simple progress, the map catching up to reality. But the timing troubles me, because the transition isn't gradual, it's concentrated. Most of the cartographic shift happens between 1780 and 1790. The exact decade of these atmospheric events, maps from 1775 still prominently feature Tartaria. Maps from 1795 have largely erased it. A civilization that occupied millions of square miles on European maps for centuries vanishes in a single decade. Not through gradual survey work, not through slow accumulation of knowledge, but suddenly, as if something happened that required the maps to change. Let me be clear about what I'm suggesting. I'm not claiming Tartaria was a unified empire. The historical record doesn't support that. Tartaria was a European cartographic label, a catch-all term for the vast territories of Central Asia that Europeans didn't understand. It referred to various Turkic and Mongolic peoples, multiple khanates, nomadic groups, and settled populations that had nothing to do with each other politically. The name itself comes from Tatar, a tribal designation that European writers generalized to mean anyone from the steppes. But here's the question that keeps gnawing at me. If Tartaria was just a label, just European ignorance gradually being corrected, why does its disappearance align so perfectly with a period of unprecedented atmospheric catastrophe? The Laki eruption alone released an estimated 120 million tons of sulfur dioxide. For comparison, that's 6 times the total output of Mount Pinatubo in 1991. It's more than 120 years' worth of sulfur dioxide emissions from every coal-fired power plant in the United States, and it wasn't released in a single explosive event. It was released episodically, in 10 separate pulses over 8 months. Each pulse sent material to altitudes between 9 and 12 kilometers, right into the polar jet stream. The jet stream carried the sulfur-rich plumes eastward over Europe, where they were caught in a quasi-stationary high-pressure system. The subsiding air within this anticyclone pulled the aerosol cloud down from the upper troposphere and reintroduced it into the lower atmosphere in a spiral pattern. So the haze didn't just pass over Europe, it circulated, it descended, it lingered at ground level, creating the dry fog that smelled of sulfur and metal. And it carried something else, ash, fine particulate matter that fell across the continent. In Scotland, observers reported dark, sooty rain. In Iceland, ash accumulated 4 to 5 inches deep in some areas. Ships in the North Atlantic reported ash on their decks. French naturalists documented ash in rainwater across multiple regions. This wasn't just sulfuric acid, this was physical. Material, debris from the eruption itself, small enough to remain airborne for weeks. Traveling thousands of miles on atmospheric currents that now ask yourself this: if volcanic ash from Iceland could reach Scotland, France, and Norway in 1783, where else could it reach? Across Russia into Central Asia, to the regions marked on maps as Tartaria? There's no direct evidence of Laki ashfall that far east, but there's also no systematic record, because the territories in question were precisely the places Europeans weren't surveying. The unmapped regions, the blank spaces between empires, the areas that would, within a decade, be subdivided, renamed, and integrated into the expanding Russian and Chinese domains. What if the atmospheric events of 1780-1784 didn't just affect Europe? What if they affected the entire Northern Hemisphere in ways we've only partially documented? And what if the resulting chaos, depopulation, or displacement in Central Asia created a power vacuum that the surrounding empires rushed to fill, redrawing borders and erasing old territorial names in the process? I'm not claiming certainty. I'm pointing at a pattern. 1780, Dark Day, North America. Ashfall, attributed to forest fires, coincides with American independence and the beginning of fresh cartographic efforts. 1783 to 84, Laki eruption. 8 months of sulfurous haze. Ashfall across multiple continents, blood red sun. Extreme weather, crop failures, famine in Egypt, the Great Tenmai famine in Japan possibly worsened, drought in eastern China, and in Europe, a winter so severe that the Mississippi River froze at New Orleans. 1783 to 1790, Tartaria fragments on maps, subdivided into Russian, Chinese, and independent territories, then erased entirely. 1789, French Revolution begins. Historians note that the extreme weather and failed harvests of 1785 contributed significantly to rural poverty and famine, creating conditions that fed into revolutionary fervor. The official explanation treats these as separate events: weather, geology, politics, each in its own category. But what if they're connected? What if a massive atmospheric disruption created cascading effects that reshaped not just climate, but political boundaries, population distributions, and historical narratives? I started looking at what happened in Russia during this period. Catherine the Great ruled from 1762 to 1796. Her reign saw aggressive expansion into territories previously outside Russian control. In 1783, the same year the Laki eruption began, Russia annexed Crimea. Between 1785 and 1791, Russia pushed further into the Caucasus and Central Asia. The timing is precise. As the atmospheric events unfolded, Russian borders expanded into regions that had been marked on earlier maps as Tartarian territory. The same pattern appears in China. The Qing dynasty, under Emperor Qianlong, had been expanding westward into Xinjiang and Tibet for decades, but the pace accelerated in the 1780s. By 1790, Chinese control extended over vast regions that earlier European maps had labeled as parts of Tartaria. The official histories frame this as natural imperial expansion, but the timing aligns with the atmospheric events, as if the chaos created an opportunity. And then there's the question of population. Iceland lost 20% of its people to the famine caused by Laki. Egypt lost roughly 1/6 of its population in the 1780 for famine, linked to climate disruption from the eruption. Europe saw thousands of excess deaths from the extreme winter. If these effects reached Central Asia, which atmospheric models suggest they might have, what happened to the populations living there? We have no systematic records, because those regions were, by definition, the places Europeans weren't documenting. The blank spaces, the areas labeled Tartaria precisely because they were unknown. If the ashfall, the sulfurous haze, the climate disruption reached those territories, who would have recorded it? And if populations were displaced, decimated, or forced to migrate, who would have written it down? The historical silence isn't proof of absence. It's the expected result of a region deliberately unmapped. Here's the final piece that troubles me most. The winter of 1783 to 84 wasn't just cold. It was the longest period of below zero temperatures in New England's recorded history. The largest snow accumulation in New Jersey. The longest freeze of Chesapeake Bay. These are extreme outliers, not just unusual, unprecedented. And they happened in the immediate aftermath of the Laki eruption, during the months when the sulfuric haze was at its densest. If North America experienced that level of disruption, 3,000 miles from the eruption, source, what did Siberia experience? What did the steppes experience? What happened in the regions between the Russian Empire and the Chinese Empire? In the territories that maps simply called Tartaria, we're told the label disappeared because knowledge improved, because explorers arrived, because empires expanded. And that's true, but it's incomplete. Knowledge improved in the aftermath of catastrophe. Explorers arrived into populated regions, Empires expanded into power vacuums. The ash fall of 1783 to 84 isn't a footnote. It's a hemispheric event with documented climate impacts from Iceland to Japan, from Egypt to North America, and it happened in the exact decade when Tartaria vanished from maps. Not over centuries, not gradually. In 10 years, a label that had persisted for 400 years was gone. So here's the question I can't stop asking. What if the erasure of Tartaria from cartography wasn't just an update? What if it was a reset? A moment when the old names couldn't survive because the territories they describe had fundamentally changed, not through politics alone, but through environmental collapse, through ashfall, through a silent, atmospheric catastrophe that lasted 8 months and left consequences that rippled for years. I don't have answers. I have patterns: sulfurous haze, blood red sun, ashen rainwater, maps changing, borders shifting, populations disappearing from historical record, and a name that once spanned a continent, gone without explanation, without ceremony, just erased, as if something happened that we're not supposed to remember.